All right. What's up, Lawrence Sprung? I'm excited to be able to hang out with you today. And obviously, I think let's start with the most traditional thing that anybody goes in any of these conversations. Who the heck is this guy?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, thank you for having me, Rick. I appreciate it, and pleasure to be here. So, I am a first and foremost, I am a husband to my wife Denise of 23 years, and father to my two boys Zach and Jeremy, who are 20 and 17. And I enjoy spending as much time with the family as I possibly can. And one of the things that we share in common is our love for hockey. I grew up playing, both my boys play, and we're a little bit fanatical about it. And I just so happen to be in the wealth management profession and have been for the last 20 plus years. So, first and foremost, family guy, and secondly, helping other families with their wealth.
It's awesome, man. And shout out to you because there's a lot of guys. I've actually one of the groups I'm going to shout out a little bit here. I know I talk with Les McDaniels and a lot of the guys in the front row dad sphere. They're saying a lot of what you're saying too. Instead of I'm a businessman with a family, I'm a family man with a business. And
Yeah.
it sounds like you're right in that area too.
Well, I think if you identify yourself with the work you do, I think it's a little bit troublesome unless that's what you want to identify. Because if you ever want to separate from that, it makes it very difficult. Whereas my family is always going to be there. So, I think that we have to get into a frame of mind and mindset that we are people first, and our occupation is just something we choose to do for a living. It's not who we are at our fabric, if you will.
I love it. It's what I do. It's not who I am.
Right.
I like it. All right.
Exactly.
So let's get into it. We know at least if you get into multiple different facets of balance, health, wealth, love, happiness, it's at least a core piece, and you're like, I play in the wealth side. If people want to get this side done, I'm your dude. Help us out. If people are like, Lawrence, I want help in the wealth side, where would you go? Like, well, let's go ahead and ask some questions, or here's where I would get started. How does it work? Help us out. Listen, we all want more money. We all want safety, security. We all want financial stability. Where do we start?
Yeah. So I would say we're a little bit different. We're not just concentrating on the wealth side. And I talk about in my book, Financial Planning Made Personal, I talk about really these three pillars, or the three legs of the stool, if you will. And that is financial health is one of those pillars and one of those legs. Second is mental health, and third is physical health. And really, if you think about it, if you're lacking in any one of those areas, it has a direct effect and implication on the others. Just as an example, if your mental health is not prime, you're probably not going to be handling your money properly, and you're probably not going to be working out and taking care of your physical health. So they're very intertwined. But so those are areas, and we try to dive into all those areas with the families we serve, and talk to them about finding their freedom, what financial freedom means to them. Because really, it doesn't matter what I think it should be. It matters what they're striving for and what their goals and objectives are and what that means to them. And it's something that's extremely personal. And so we delve down into that. And then we work really backwards. We find out what their why is, which was actually the first chapter of the book, figuring out what that why is and what's important to you and your family. And then we work backwards. Now, how do we build a plan? How do we then take the assets to help fulfill that plan and help you fulfill your goals and meet your financial freedom?
I'm with you, but I got questions. Okay.
Sure.
Now we all know the Simon Sinek version of what's your why, what's your why, what's your why. But I've also been doing this long enough to know if I start with what's your why, it can be frustrating. And this is why, even for our program, like, what do you want? Isn't until like we already go through know thyself, know thy enemy, and then understand where you're starting at. We have to go through your inventory on life. And it's pretty gut wrenching most of the time when you're like, damn, this is where I'm at. Most people are having a hard time with answering, well, what do I want? Let alone what my purpose for life or my why is, because we've been told what to do our whole lives. And heaven forbid you catch a military guy or, gal at this point where it's like, not only was I raised, I listened to my parents, I listened to my teachers, I listened to my coaches, I listened to my bosses, I listen to my spouse, I listen to my superior officer, and I've always been told what to do until I had to take care of others. And then I listen to what they need and I just take care of their stuff. When was I ever supposed to learn what I want? And a lot of people are like, I don't even have that muscle. I've been just doing what I've been told and taking care of everybody else my whole life. What's my why?
Mhm.
Like, you have to have a process here because the answers aren't the solutions. And so somebody's saying, like, know your why. And you're like, sounds awesome. How do you do that? Like, how do you help people who are
I
obviously running into that wall?
First of all, it's an iterative process, right? If you look at it from a standpoint of, what's my higher purpose, you may not know that today. You may not understand that. You may not know what that even looks like. So, it's like anything else in life, right? I kind of can equate this to a story that somebody told me a long time ago, and that was, if you're walking down the street and you pick up the tiniest pebble and you put it an inch from your eye and you look at it, it looks like a boulder that you're never going to get around and you're not going to be able to accomplish anything by moving forward. But if you put it out at an arm's length and you put it in perspective, it's a much easier challenge to get around through, etc. Right? So you have to do the same thing. It's same thing with finances, same thing with finding your why. You have to start somewhere and figure out what your purpose may be today or what is important to you, what's most important to you today, and simply start there. You have to start with a small digestible piece and then over time start flexing that muscle and saying, okay, well, this is where I was 6 months ago. Is this really what's motivating me today? And if it is, great, then maybe you're even closer to that path to finding that why. But at the same time, if it's not what you really want to strive for, then you have to adjust it and make those adjustments as you go. And, it's not that you have this one why for your entire lifetime. It's going to be several iterations of that why, and it's going to change perhaps with age, perhaps with life facts and circumstances. Life events that take place may change that why. I had events in my life that changed my why, which I'll share with you and the listeners today. My why took a major shift when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. I was 13 years old and she was in her 30s. That shifted my why significantly. And then fast forward to 2004, I lost my brother-in-law to suicide. That shifted my why again. So what I would say to your listeners and people who are trying to discover that, it's like, you're not going to try to figure out if your goal is to amass $10 million or whatever the number is for you and your family. You're not going to go out there and say, oh, I'm going to amass $10 million and expect it to be done tomorrow. You're going to have to track that over time and set reasonable expectations and goals. Same thing with your why. And it's going to, and it will change over time, just like your financial plan will.
Yeah, I gotta give you credit here on this one because you went through a few different words that we'll have to go through, but testimony to you on being able to recognize that you talk about the three pillars: financial health, mental health, physical health. But then when you talked about your why, not one of those is financial. They were all in the loss category: mom's health or your brother. And like, I definitely would like to tap in a little more because the courage and like the strength that it takes to be able to persevere this kind of loss is impactful because a lot of my guys, we have to talk about this often because isolation and the beat down on men today, like, we are creating the spaces, but most guys don't know that these spaces we're creating exist. And so there's a lot of guys who are going through it alone when they don't know that they don't have to. And so, well, if we can, we'll get into that in a little bit, but it's just a testament to you saying, my why wasn't money. My why was, the things that you said the term was, what is most important to you? And
Mhm.
I really enjoy the subjectivity of that question because it is different for each of us, but not enough of us are doing the introspection to go, well, what is the answer to it? And so,
I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy thing, and some people it comes easier than others, right? In my situation, there were life events that said, "Hey," I felt like it was laying out there on a silver platter for me, like, "Hey, life is short." I lost my mom at the age of 47, and I was like, "Life is short. We got to make the most of it." And we look and view, and like you said, I didn't say anything about money or finances because I feel like money and finances is really just a tool for you to find that freedom and for you to live out whatever that vision of your why and your freedom are. One of the things I talk about very often is like, you'll hear advisors or people in the financial space talk about, oh, those coffee companies, you spend $3, $4 a day on a coffee. But if you took that money and invested it every day and put it in a Roth IRA at the end of 20 or 30 years, you'll have 20, $30,000, whatever the number is, whatever the calculation comes out to be. But when it comes down to it, right, where the rubber meets the road, if at the end of the day, every day you get joy out of having that cup of coffee and you've planned to be able to drink that cup of coffee in your financial budget, then do it. Because what are you going to wait for? Start drinking that coffee when you're 65, 7? You may not make it then. So enjoy it now, plan for it, budget for it, and incorporate it. So, you have to have that kind of mentality and you have to be able to, incorporate those things into your life.
I really enjoy the awareness talk you're doing already. I'm already enjoying the way, like, do you see it in a different way? Is it a boulder? Is it a pebble? Is this coffee for enjoyment of life, or are you trying to not start enjoying your life until you're 70? I love it. Points of view, different challenging perspective, especially when you see people who are experts where people don't ask enough questions. And I like that you're like, wait a second, let me ask a question here. Hold on a second. Like, and I do like that. I appreciate and honor that for sure. The non-life math. I like when people do that. Well, if you just take away all the things that make you happy and just take that money and do things that we invest in later on, you'll have more. You're like, well, what happened to the happy though?
What happens if later on never happens,
Yeah.
which
Like,
could?
which this is where I can see your values shifted pretty hard with mom's cancer and your brother, with the loss of your brother. This is where you're like, wait a second, well, there's no guarantees that
Right.
retirement is going to happen. There's no guarantees. So how do I make it so I make my kids have to sacrifice so they can have a retirement that may never happen when we can have all these memories we can lock in now?
Well, first of all, I don't necessarily even believe in retirement. I think it's an antiquated kind of concept that, was created when people lived till they were 60. They worked to a period of time and then got to retire. And the reason why they got to retire is because they probably weren't going to live much longer. But that's not the case today. So I think this whole construct that we work 30, 40, 50 years for some point in the future that we get to enjoy life all of a sudden, stop what we're doing and enjoy life. Well, that makes no sense to me. Why not enjoy life all along the way, figure out work life harmony that works for you and your family, not work life balance, because I feel that that gives the impression that you're sacrificing something. You're either giving up work or you're giving up family for that balance. It should be harmonious, that they go in hand with each other. You should be enjoying life all along the way. And, then that would lessen the need for this retirement goal where you all of a sudden stop. Now, listen, some people may be prepared for that and may be looking forward to that. And I have no qualms about that. That's perfectly fine. That's their freedom, and we'll help them work towards that freedom. But others, I know for a fact that, when we start talking to them about this concept, that why do you have to retire? And I think it's evident by the number of people that are working later in life. I know that the media will give you the impression that people are working longer because they need to from a financial aspect. And, I no mitigation and no disrespect. And because there are people that certainly have to work till they're 70 or 80 for financial reasons. But there are plenty of others. I think they're outnumbering those that are doing it for financial reasons, that are doing it because they don't know what to do with 40, 50 hours a week. They don't know how to fill up that time with meaningful stuff that they're not going to be sitting in front of the TV. So, the whole retirement concept to me is a bit, wonky as it is.
I love it. I like that you said harmony, not balance. And it's like, when people start getting into sacrifice and compromise is one of those things where it's like, well, nobody really wins. It's
Right.
like a little less happy than the good version. Like this system of like, how much do I have to give to make it so I can balance? There's no harmony. I enjoy that. I want more of that in a second. But
Okay.
also how much is associated with like someone's identity, especially like, what, today the burden of performance is falling on women more aggressively than it ever has, but it's always been there for men. What's the first question when you meet a guy? Hey, good to meet you. What do you do?
Right.
You know,
Right.
and where our association with our status or our strength or our personality or our place in the conversation, the first question is what do you do? And
Yeah.
so what do you do when that's gone? That's a massive, massive loss. And so I like that you're like, I don't know about this retirement idea. Look at I'll give you an example for my military guys, all my vets, the people who I work with. Every single one of them has associated the day they retired as a massive loss.
Hmm.
All of their systems, all of their dynamics, all of their friendships that they see every day, all of their purpose, all of their stuff, all in one moment is now completely shifted into the unknown. And they're like, this is a devastating moment for anybody who's ever served. And this goes the same way with anybody who gets a divorce or loses their job or like anything where there's a massive identity shift, a massive change. The losses can be really, really difficult without any type of grieving training to be able to work through because your identity just got flushed into the grinder. And so this is where I'm with you. Can you maybe help more with like, all right, here's what the harmony slash understanding should be if done right. Please give us some hope.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that that looks a lot different for different people, right? It's not going to look the same. How I interpret that and experience that is going to be very different than others, and there's really no judgment. If it works for them and they're truly enjoying both sides, then that's fine. For me, I'll share, if I go away and I get a business phone call and I'm spending some serious family time and I get a business phone call, my kids and my family understand that I run a business. And the fact that I took a call, I'm not on the phone constantly, but the fact I took a call means that I had to do that. And that there's probably good reason that I needed to do that. And at the same time, they understand that, being a business owner and entrepreneur is also affording us the ability to be wherever we are doing whatever we're doing. So if we have to take the call, they understand that. So I think that's a good example of how it kind of works together. Now, if you're the type of person that is on the phone constantly, you go on a cruise or vacation and you don't get off the phone the whole time. I don't know how harmonious that is between the work and the life, but the occasional call, the occasional email, if you have to check it once a day or something like that, I think that's a way that you weave in harmony. And that is what's worked for me and my family. And that may not work for your next listener or the listener after that. They have to find their own method and means that works in the framework of their family and their, situation, if you will.
Yeah, it's tough when the answer is correct, but the answer is there's no answer until I
Right.
talk to you. Like
Right.
it's you're not wrong, and each person has a different dynamic, especially with like what that family life or that house like looks like. And so you're not wrong, but it's like, wanted more though.
I mean, I think to some degree you can identify when it is a wrong situation, when you're not in a harmonious situation. Typically, you can identify that, right? That'll be easier. So I think it'd be more so don't do what you think would not be harmonious. Do anything else other than that, and you're probably within that window. Because
So
I think you'd have
your
an
target
easier
is
time.
harmony. Like you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you'd have an easier time identifying when it's not harmonious than maybe when it is.
This gets yeah, let's look in a little bit more. All right, so this gets into like the priorities talk. And people do struggle with priorities because I think people put their wishes in or what they want it to be in with their priorities. So if you said, what are your priorities? You go like, oh, obviously it's family or relationship first, and then it'll be work, and then it'll be this. And you go, okay, well, let's look at how many hours you're putting in here in each category. And you realize you're putting in like 60 with work, 5 with relationships. And you're like, are you sure that's above work? Are
Yep.
you sure that's a more important priority to you when it's taking up, roughly 8% of your week goes into your number one priority? How much is actually take care of yourself? Mental health, physical health. How much? It is 3 pillars. How much of
Mhm.
it is mental, physical when you say it's a priority? How do you, is this more of also a very subjective answer for each person is different, or do you have a formula that's been working like as a baseline?
Yeah, I don't think there's any direct formula, and I think that people, I don't think everybody's going to answer it in that same way that you laid out in terms of family first. There are certainly people that are out there that we run into that their career is first and foremost.
Mhm.
That's their top priority, and whether that's right or wrong, as long as it works with them and their spouse and their family, then that's fine. I think there's also, though, to your point, I think there's a difference between saying and doing, right? I think, having a priority and saying it's a priority is one thing, but actually having it as a family or a personal core value and actually filtering all of your decision making process through that core value is two very different things, right? One of the things that I did very early on is I lived by it, right? So I took time off with my family when my first son was born. I took off every Friday in the month of June. And then I started taking it off every Friday in the month of June, July, then June, July, and August. And at that time, I didn't have the number of stakeholders that were working in our organization at that time. It was, virtually just me. And I would let the families we serve know that I was going to be out on Fridays in the month of June, July, or whatever it was. And we still have families today that call during the summertime and they speak with with our stakeholders, and they say, they ask if they want to speak with me, and they're like, "Oh, he's in," because they still were trained and think that I'm not in because it's Friday in the summer. But so I think that we kind of get in our own way sometimes. So I think saying and doing are two very different things. And if you're going to say it and that's really what you want to do, you have to filter the decision making process through that lens. So if you have a decision to make a call at, somebody requests a meeting after 6 o'clock, and that's normally family time, and family is your number one core value, then you have to say to that family, I'm really sorry, but I have to go to my son, daughter, child, whatever sports practice. It's my family time. When can we reschedule during these hours so I'm not eating into the family time? Or you just say, no, it's not a good fit. So I think you have to get in the habit of filtering those decisions and choices through those values in order to get that more properly aligned and looking at your time more properly.
Yeah, you're doing warrior talk, brother. I like that. Healthy boundaries. Do what you say you're gonna do. Hold your ground. I like it. This is great,
Yeah.
man. And so, like,
Listen, if people don't respect it, then they're not a good fit for you or your business, whatever business you're in. If they're not going to be respectful of what your values are, then you're not in alignment. They're not really a good fit for working with you.
mhm. Well, it's also tough too. I've been doing this enough years that whenever we do value training, almost nobody actually gets it right. It's usually what they want and not what they actually like filter their values through. So people will be like, my values are faith and joy. And I'll be like, okay, really though, when you're working through your stuff, what is your main purpose on these things? How do you operate through this? When things are going well, what do you do when things are going wrong? Is it just faith and joy when things are going crazy? Like, well, no, then I get into the hard work and I collaborate this way and then I do this thing. And it's all about the reason why I'm doing that is to connect. So that way we can get this services done. And I'm like, it sounds more like we're getting in a connection and service versus joy and faith. Like people don't really know because they're not asking questions because we're not trained to ask those questions. So like this is where I would probably lean into like, well, what do Rick or what do Lawrence do? What do you guys, why do we do that? Why do I have to hire you guys? Well, because people don't know the questions they don't know to ask. That's
Yeah.
why.
Right.
Like
You only know what you know.
the answers aren't the solution. And if you already knew the solution to get to the answer, you wouldn't have any more questions. That's
Right.
what we all do. We just fast forward. Could you figure it out? Yeah, you could figure it out. Take you 20 years or whatever, but you'd figure it out, sure. Do you want it to take 6 months or 20 years though?
Hmm.
So that's where you just pay for those extra 19 years that you get to have. So that's where
Good
like
point.
I like what you're doing because I can see you're going, let's fast forward progress by being able to raise our awareness of certain areas by teaching you the skills that it takes to see these things in a different light, different perspective, different, you know, tactics, different avenues. So you can actually do the thing that you want, have what you want, have the harmony, find those growth moments so you can find a not a balance, but a way that works for your life. Now, let's go into some of the other stuff. We talk about you got three pillars. I know that you're in your book. It doesn't just say, all right, physical health, work out, eat better. All right, chapter 3. Like, I know that that's not the whole thing. help us out. What's the harmony now? We got to do mental health, which that's my world. Let's talk. But we also got to do physical health. We got to do financial health. I want your perspective on like this is the way the harmony works for these. Please.
Yeah, well, I mean, they all have to be attended to, and make sure that you're addressing the needs and what you need to do in each of those areas. For example, on the mental health side, it's one thing to talk about the financial piece, right? But at the same time, you have to be mentally prepared for whatever those goals are that you have, whatever those plans are. Especially for those folks that are considering, as we discussed earlier, retirement, right? A lot of people prepare themselves financially. They start 10, 15 years in advance to make sure that they're in a financial good situation to be able to retire or slow down, whatever that means or their goals are. But what they don't do is think about the mental aspects. They don't start working on the social aspects of having all this additional free time. They don't work on the mental aspects of having this free time and filling it with meaningful work. So we really truly believe that as soon as you start kind of financially preparing for whatever those goals or objectives are for you and your family, you also have to start planning for that mental and social impact. With that being said, it's also important for you to take care of your physical health, because if you don't, then if your physical health is compromised, a couple of things. One is you may not be able to reach the goals and objectives that you want to, because you may not be able to do your career or work or accumulate assets like you plan to. It may cost you a lot more to take care of yourself, either pre or post reaching those goals. And then the question is, what kind of quality of life do you want to live? If you're mentally fit and you have the financial wherewithal to do all the things, if you don't have that physical component, then what is that going to matter that you have the financial and mental when you're not going to be able to go out and do those things? So it's important that all three of those things get addressed and they be planned for, not just kind of flying by the seat of your pants. And just like anything else, the earlier you start that planning process, the better off you're going to be to make sure that you're heading on the right path.
Proactive, not reactive, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I like it.
Correct.
And one of the quotes that it reminds me of when you said that, like, if you're not taking care of your wellness now, you'll be forced to take care of your sickness later.
Agree. Good
Yeah,
quote.
so I like where you're like, no, get a head start on this. Like if you're planning for this, plan for it. Like I'm gonna
Yeah.
be hanging out with people all day. Well, when was the last time you hung out with people?
Do you know any people outside of work?
Who you hanging
Have
with?
you, who are you going to hang out with? Oh,
Yeah.
well, I hang out with all the people at the office, and we go out on the weekends and Fridays after work. Okay, but you're not there anymore. Where are they? Are they going to be hanging out with you? No. So you got to start looking at, is golf a passion of mine? Maybe I should start playing golf with a regular foursome to have a group. Am I a pickleball player, or am I a bird watcher or house renovate? Whatever it is, start entering those social circles. So when you have all this extra time, you know how to fill it with meaningful stuff.
I like this. It's the thing that just came to mind when you're saying that is like first practice a passion. Like, how do you know what you like until you start doing stuff and then start doing stuff and make that a practice? Let's try golf. Let's try. I don't even know what pickleball is. Let's try pickleball. Let's
You should
try
know it.
something.
It's the hottest. It's one of the hottest sports for those who are like 45 or 50 or older in the country.
Shut up.
It's
What is
Yeah.
pick? All right, I gotta look up pickleball. What do you?
Basically, it's like tennis and racquetball mashed up into one sport. They're starting a professional league. It's much easier on the joints, and basically, I think on one tennis court you can fit the equivalent of like 8 pickleball courts. So they're very small, and it's probably one of the hottest sports for those that are 45, 50 and up, that's being taken over by the country right now.
All right, it's got like a wiffle ball thing going
Yeah,
here.
and
All right,
paddles. Yeah, it's like
yeah,
tennis, racquetball, and
ping pong.
paddleball. Well, yeah, ping. Yeah, all wrapped up into one. So,
All right, yeah, listen,
but whatever it is, you got to figure it out. Like me. Listen, I'm a hockey guy, so I
yeah,
could go to a different hockey game, hockey arena every day, see a different, watch watch young folks play, watch professionals, and that's my thing. I can hang out with hockey people. I could go golfing with my kids. I have other stuff because I've done the work life harmony. I have other stuff that if I had the wherewithal or the desire to retire tomorrow, I can assure you I'd be able to fill up that time with meaningful stuff and never look back.
Right.
With that being said, I love what I do. I love working with the families we serve. So that's not something that's really in the cards for me anytime soon, and may never be. But that's my kind of financial, my freedom, if you will. But you have to start thinking about those things just like as early as you're starting to think about, am I financially prepared for down the road? You should also think about, am I physically and mentally prepared as well? Because it's just as important. And to your quote, to the point of that, it's probably also far more expensive to take care of yourself when you're sick than when you're well, also.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I like that. I equated oftentimes if people can't just hang out by themselves and not feel completely miserable, it's like there's a high lack of creativity that we have here. There's a high lack of like, did you reach out? Did you find stuff you like to do? Did you even test anything? Did you paint something? If you hate painting, at least you know you hate it.
right.
Do stuff. Do
Hmm.
stuff. And I it's almost kind of like the coffee thing. Like so many people are probably falling into fear or falling into worry or falling into this like, well, what if this and what if this and what if this and oh no, oh no. That you're like, did you ever stop to go like, there's some stuff I kind of like? Or did
Yeah.
you even
Well,
try to like stuff?
I think part of the problem also is if you think about it, and we see this very much from the financial side, when you're young, you think you could start saving money later on. And the reality is you're better off saving earlier. And there's huge benefits to compounding and compound interest, of course. That's why it's called the eighth wonder of the world. But with that being said, what we also find is that same mentality of I can save money later, when I'm earning more money, when I'm have a higher income. The reality is, as we progress through life, we come out of school or trades or whatever, we start working. Then what happens is maybe we find a significant other and we're trying to increase our career. We then buy a house. We have more obligations. Then we have kids, maybe. So what ends up happening is things become, constantly upgraded, more complicated. So to your point, right? It becomes harder, number one, to save money and plan for that because it's like, oh, I'm kind of in this whirlwind, and you don't have the time because of all these forces pulling at you to start building that infrastructure, the social and mental piece. So it's really important. The earlier you start that, the earlier you start working on that, the better, because it's going to put you in an ideal position to adjust things as they go along and be prepared for those life events as they take place.
Yeah, man, is that not regularly taught or what? Because
No.
think about it. You said, okay, I got to be more social. People are young. Like I got social circles. I can hang out with people now. But also like the societal aspect of like the Jones effect of living at your means or living at like, well, I got to try and, stay with the status of what's going on with this position or this lifestyle or this neighborhood or whatever. It's really
Rick, how many
difficult.
people how many people do you hang out with today that you hung out with in high school and or college?
Well, none. Very, 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 very low. I have like one or two guys I still would talk into. It's just that season has outgrown itself. Like we've outgrown the season.
That's exactly the point, right? So
Mhm.
you're social in those younger years, then you start getting busy with life, work, family, and you have a different circle. And I think what you'll find is as you age, that circle is going to change.
For sure.
It's going to morph, just like we talked about the why changing and being an iterative process. So is those circle of close people to you. There's always going to be, in most cases, maybe those one or two folks that have been around for 20, 30, 40 years by your side, and they'll always be there. But the vast majority of the remainder of the people in your circle, if you looked at your circle, they probably weren't there in most cases 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It's going to change over time. So it's important that you find those things that you're interested in, try those, because then it's easier to find those relationships because you just go where that desire or that thing you like is, right? And you're going to have an instant connection with new people regardless, because you already have that commonality with them. If it's pickleball, for example, not to pick on them, but if you all of a sudden you love pickleball, it doesn't matter. You can, move across the country, find a pickleball club, and immediately have people that you have commonality with and that you could connect with and have meaningful conversation and a good time with.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I think this is where I'm watching in the mental health side struggle for people with loss. Because like these are I've talked to people too, like, oh, but the guys I grew up with, or oh, the girls I grew up with, like, oh, but these were my people, or those were my real friends, or the belief systems that we plug into ourselves to make it so like that evolution that you said, like, well, now it's time to go into the thing that serves that next level you. You're like, yeah, but who am I if I betray my friends? And who am I if I abandon people? And who am I? And like we put these really tough shame or judgments on ourselves for our own evolution. It's a real struggle if you're trying to find a good solid support system, but you've never really had a healthy one, how you can even know what to be looking for. And why would I be accepted into a healthy one? Like there's some struggles that people are having with this one. I'd like to know your opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, everybody has their own, uh, you know, uh, viewpoint on that. I mean, for me personally, I feel like, many of the relationships that I've had, from years ago, I've just outgrown. Either, as an example, some of the folks that I hung out with 10 years ago, 15 years ago, they're still partying like we were in college. And to me, that's not for me today. So I'm not making any judgment on them. It's just not something that, is in my wheelhouse that I want to put myself in. But I think that, to some degree, we have to, I think parents have to do a better job of implementing some of these skills in their kids. And hopefully that will start changing that. But, I think that they have to lean on those people that are close to them and have those conversations. I don't think that there's anything wrong. I think the difference between, when I kind of talk about my brother-in-law a lot and his loss, via suicide. And, he used to feel like he had 105-degree fever every day and his body aches. He was 27 years old, built, went to the gym every day. He had the physical fitness, it looked like. He just didn't have, his mental health wasn't where it should be. But my point is, there was no difference between he and I, right? We were very similar, almost the same. The only difference was when some life event or something took place in his life, the way his brain processed that event or that circumstance is much different than it processed in my brain. So I think that being being aware of that and knowing that if you're one of those individuals that feels that way, I think you have to know how you handle things and how you process it, and then find people or a person or people that you can share that with that might be able to give you that perspective to maybe clear things up for you.
Yeah, I like it, dude. The brother-in-law thing I want to get into in a second, especially with the different types of processing and the solution for that. Let's go back a little bit here. I know that people don't want to feel like we require permission, but most of us have been told what to do our entire lives. And so I feel like we have an opportunity here, Lawrence, between you and I. You want Lawrence or Larry? Because I see you have Larry in
Doesn't
there.
matter.
Both, it's
It's
all the
either
same.
way. Either way is fine.
Fair enough. So as far as this goes, if all right, Rick and Larry are going to tell you, we're going to give you some permission right now. It is okay to outgrow your friend groups that you used to have. Permission to evolve, permission to grow. It's okay. Authenticity does not require permission, but we'll give it to you anyways. Be yourself. Find what
Yeah.
you like. Find people who like the same stuff you like. And it's okay to outgrow the party scene. It's okay to evolve into something that's authentic. It's okay to find your own way, even if people who you knew from a location that I used to go to school with, or I used to work with, or I used to hang out with at this location, you can outgrow these seasons. And so I think people get really stuck when they like feel like, oh my God, I'm the bad one, which leads us to the judgment aspect of things.
Yeah. I will tell you this, Rick, two things. Number one is I cannot say anybody's ever told me what to do because people have tried to tell me and I do the opposite. Because if I followed that framework, I would be a teacher because that's what my dad wanted me to be, was a teacher, to have a pension.
Hmm.
And when he was like, "You're starting a business, you're not going to have a pension," he was like, "I don't even know what that's about. You got to find a job that you have a paycheck," which, when I first started, I didn't. So I wasn't very good at that.
Hmm.
But I could also share with you, with my kids, as I mentioned earlier, they're 17 and 20. And we have this conversation and have had it a few times, over the years. And that is, you're a reflection of your closest five friends. And, every so often, not that they're bad people, they're not bad humans, but look around and your immediate circle, those five people, are those people you want to be a reflection of. If so, then you're in the right place. And, if not, then you have to rethink that and, rethink the relationships that you have. So there is absolutely no qualms about relooking at that and releasing, and there are certain people out there, certain people that I know, for example, and we all know those guys and gals who have a tendency to be friends with everybody that they have ever met. Everybody that they ever met, they keep in that circle, and they have to, if they're invited, they have to go. You don't have to do that. That's not something you have to do. And I think it's important to know that. And I think it's important to kind of think in that framework that you are a representation of those closest five people and take a look. Is this what I want as a representative of me? And if not, make those changes. It's okay.
It's truly remarkable how much, like, I think I've heard quoted a few other ways too. You are the average of the five people you hang out with the most. Like you're in the middle, but it goes into, it's more than just financial. It's morals, it's,
Oh,
faith,
everything. Yeah.
it's decision making. It's your results show you the results of the choices that you make of the people that you hang out with. And it's
Hmm.
pretty interesting when you look at, like, I am the average with my health, wealth, love, happiness of the people I hang out with the most. And it's remarkable too when you watch somebody getting a divorce, how that can trickle into the other relationships you hang out with the most. And it's it's very spot on. And I think there more awareness around that gives people more opportunity to go, like, I need to be more selective, not only in my awareness of what I want, but also in the people I hang around me, whether they help me grow or if they hold me back.
Right. I
Yeah, well
agree.
said. Well said on this one. I'm going to shift a little bit serious here. And I want to get into the mental health side. This is like our bread and butter in this one. Mental health side. Let's talk about, like, the processing. The your brother-in-law had to go through a thing where, like, he felt like the weight of the world was on his shoulders and there was no way to take it off. The only way out is this way. And I didn't know him, but I've had enough of these conversations to understand how the stack works. And, if he felt carefree and everything was wonderful, this wouldn't even be a viable option. So I know the weight of the world, the Atlas curse is definitely a part of this. Um, can you share part of, like, your chapter on mental health and how you approach this? And then let's team up and help some people get out of some holes here.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I became an advocate to some degree when we lost my brother-in-law, and basically what that propelled us to do, my wife and I, uh, basically resolved to the fact that we weren't going to let my brother-in-law go lightly. And keep in mind, this was about 19 years ago, so there wasn't as much dialogue about mental health and suicide as there is today. It was a little bit even further in the darkness than it is currently at this moment. So, we were going out on a limb to some degree, saying, "Hey, we're not going to let him go lightly, and we're going to share his story, and we're going to be open and honest about what his struggles were, and hopefully in an effort to help others." And we had countless people at his funeral and thereafter that came up to us, in a quiet way and said, "I kind of know what you're going through. My uncle died in a car crash. Wink, wink." Or this situation, wink, wink. And we weren't going to do that. We were going to be open and honest and share. And that led us to, led me to being on the national board for the largest nonprofit in the suicide prevention space, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP.org. And I spent about 12, 13 years on their national board of directors, and simultaneously, my wife and I started a memorial fund, the Keith Milano Memorial Fund, that was held at AFSP, and through a lot of hard work, a lot of great people that we've connected with over the years, we were able and have raised about $1.7 million for that organization and for that fund. So it's something that's very important to me. More important than anything I've said up until this point is the fact that we've also become these de facto resources in the community, whether that be our local community or online community, where people do reach out to us if they or somebody they know is in struggle. Most recently, I had a call on Friday. A friend of mine that I've known for a number of years called. He was sitting out outside of his stepson's work. The kid is like in his early 20s. Girlfriend broke up with him via text, and he was threatening to take his life. And I had a conversation with him. He knows I'm not a medical practitioner, but had a conversation with him, kind of walked him through the process. And as of a couple of days ago, he was, doing a little bit better, and they were working on getting him some help and getting him to agree to some help. So, those are the things. And we've been in a position where by lending a hand and guidance, we know that we've saved lives, and that kind of trumps any of those other pieces. So it's really important that if you want to be successful in any area of your life, whether it be financial, physical, or anything for that matter, you have to have that mental health component. It has to be something that we have to work on, and it's something that we have to have in good order. And not everybody works the same. As I mentioned to you earlier, the same events could happen to me, could happen to my brother-in-law, but the way his brain processes it, it would be and could be completely different than when I process it. So, you have to keep that in mind when you're working with others, and whether it's friends or family, you have to keep that in mind. And it's okay not to be okay, and it's okay for you, if you see somebody struggling, to ask them if they're okay, and make sure that they're in a good spot. And if they're not, help them as best you can. And then there are resources obviously available. 988, which was recently launched, that's available. That's not just for folks that need help or are in crisis. That's for if you see a family member in crisis and you're like, I have no clue how to help this person. Call 988, and they'll help you and walk you through it and guide you, and hopefully facilitate a good outcome for your friend or family member.
Yeah, it's a tough area to be able to talk about, and like it's so many unique situations. And I actually, one concern that I have is like, it's interesting that you said my buddy's son, who's in his early 20s, with as much awareness as there is around it, how much exposure without training can become a problem. We're like, you just had a breakup, dude. But like a breakup, the first go-to is end my life instead of like make a call. Like, what are we doing with the awareness that we have exposure to, where like kill myself is the first answer? It's like, well, hold on. Wouldn't maybe what's wrong with like ask a friend or call
Well, I
dad?
think I think in this
Like,
particular yeah, I think in this particular situation there was more involved. There were struggles there already, and this was
yeah.
just kind of the thing that pushed things over the edge. So, usually if you look back, it's in certain or maybe all situations. I don't know what the research shows, but I would imagine in most cases it's not one thing that
Oh,
led the person down that path. It's usually a collection of things, and then there's usually maybe one event or item that kind of push them into a really bad spot.
well, sure. And this is where even my training aspect of, I work in this field on these people all the time, especially veterans and people who have been through extreme PTSD and trauma. So like when they've gone through some really tough things, it's amazing how much of a lack of tools they have in this category to go, how do I sort this out or process? You're not wrong by no means. You're very right. I just get concerned with how much exposure we had. Our oldest daughter was associating, again, who you hang out with people who were into these conversations, and they talked about it often, and self-harm and medication and these things were part of the belief system of that social circle. But she didn't have any of these issues until those associations and that exposure, until she started going, well, instead of work through my things like I normally would, now let's try this system. And ended up, in some pretty dark times because of the exposure she was given, as well. Maybe the way I should handle it is through this extreme method. And it was a big eye opener when she got to see the reality of like the things that she was sorting. Just it was unnecessary to go this direction, but there was so much, I don't want to say attention or glamour or exposure of like, making it seem better than it is. Like, oh, if you have this, you'll get the sympathy you've always wanted, or you get the attention that you always wanted. But unfortunately, there is a backlash on this where people are getting attention when they really need help. And it's
Right.
making it so it's rewiring almost their system for value or love to go, I'm only loved if I'm in turmoil because then I get the attention I'm seeking. And this can be such a slippery slope for like mental health is important, but what exposures are we giving now with the information being poured out there with people saying, here's my struggle, and they're getting 10 million views?
Right.
It's like, well, now my kid is struggling with this game. So it took us a month. She had to sit with me for a month to rewire things. But not everybody has that resource of sitting down with somebody who works in
Agreed.
that field. And so I'm with you as far as it's such an uphill battle for our kids these days to say, like, this level of reaction is now being normalized. And so to say, like, this stack of things, I don't understand how to work through grief. I don't understand how to work through loss. I don't understand how to have let's talk about the social aspect, a real conversation about it, a serious conversation, especially being in that, like, 17 to 25 range. We're still working on those social skills to be able to be vulnerable without ridicule, without judgment, without shame, without, it's so much transition from teenage year into adulthood. It's tough. So how do I go, hey guys, can I talk to you guys about, mental health? And they're like, we don't know what the fuck you're talking about. We have that too, and we don't know how to talk about it, but we can't talk to our parents, or we can't talk to, I don't feel like if I reached out that I would be appreciated, loved, concerned about any empathy. I don't think anybody would understand. This is a tough time. We have more information than ever, but we have more disorders and more issues in health, wealth, love, happiness than ever. So, like, I know that I kind of ranted a little bit, but I definitely want to hear your insight on this because we've run into the same issues with the exposure creates new problems.
Yeah, I mean, this exposure certainly can. I think it's up to, especially with young folks, I think it's up to parents to kind of keep an eye on their kids and keep that open dialogue. I could just share, our personal situation was we always shared, my brother-in-law's story with both my boys, even from when they were little. I mean, we did it in an age appropriate way. When they were young, it was he had a disease of the brain, and we basically left it at that. And we always talked about him and his struggles and his issues. And that led to when they were teenagers, they were there and helpful resources for their friends. And they ran into situations where their friends were having issues and contemplating certain things. And they would say, talk to your mom and dad, get it sorted out with them. And they're like, oh, I've tried to talk. They don't want to listen, and these are things that have to be talked about. It has to be an open and honest dialogue within the house. I don't think it's as easy as just going to a doctor and getting medication all the time. I think it's something that we have to nurture and use nature as our young folks are growing up to kind of, bring them to a point where they feel comfortable and empowered to talk about these things and address it and understand what's a proper reaction, what may not be a proper reaction, what they, how they should react to certain things, just so they have an understanding of that. And I think to your point, social media has been, somewhat detrimental to that. I think, I don't think you can put all the onus on that, but it's certainly a contributor. And for those that are struggling, I think it even contributes more so in a negative way. And those that aren't struggling, it may contribute a little bit, but they may know how to navigate that a little bit better. So, it's listen, it's a challenge. I don't think the challenge is any different today than it was, the root of the challenge, any different today than it was 20 years ago. I think it's just different circumstances and different methods and means that are leading us to the same place. And I think the other thing is today you're hearing a lot more talk about it. People are being more open and honest. So you're hearing about it a lot more, which is a blessing and a curse at the same time, right?
Yeah, no, well said. Tough game, man. It's a tough game. And like, even just the tech game in general, we're at trillions of percentage of growth in our tech in the last 20 to 50 years. Like it's trillions of percentage of growth. The tech
Yeah.
that we had 30 years ago to now, it's like touch screens were only on movies that was like space age tech. And now everybody has touch screens. Even this right now, when they would do like Back to the Future, this was like a video call is like
Right.
only when we're in our hover car, like
Yeah.
so it's amazing the technology growth, but there's also like we're trying to figure out and navigate where's the lines because our we have three teenage girls, and let's just say the exposure versus the much how much we can contribute to how much they're exposed to. We're hoping that we're higher than single digits. We're hoping because they have so much information thrown on them, and they're trying to navigate all this during a time of evolution. So teenage years are just tough all the way around. Adding in this much information without training, it can be tough. And so I can see like why is his son going right to like, oh, I had a breakup, the only way to solve that is I need to end it. It's like, no, we have to learn how to cope and how to grieve.
Mhm.
Like that's trainable. So I think I want to give a little bit of hope here instead of doom and gloom. With even the Warriors way side, and even I want to hear more for your side for like where do they go? I know 988 or being able to go to afsp.org, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so making sure like there's options, but even the Warriors way, I used to have these suicide calls probably every couple weeks. There'd be somebody who's like, I'm next to the gun, man, about to end this. Like there would be those calls where I have to pull them off the edge, by helping them see purpose, belonging, understanding, like getting into their stuff. And we created a group at nighttime for the guys just to hang out. Like we don't have to train. We don't have to go into hard stuff. These guys have all gone through training and we've all, beaten some pretty tough monsters. We've broken curses. We've gone into hell together and we've come out together. These guys are battle proficient,
Right.
but they're just there if you want to talk about fishing, you want to talk about trucks, you want to talk about whatever, go hang with the boys. And it's ironic that since we've done this and there's been a place that the guys can just hang and feel not isolated, feel like they belong, feel like there's a healthy conversation. They can be silly and play with each other, like just goof on each other and rag on each other, but also know that if you're really going through it, somebody will be there to have your back. Since we started that program, and it's been 7 months now, we have had none of those calls. So there is something to
That's
like,
great.
is there a place that guys can go? It's not as common. There's a million women's areas to do this, but like not very many guys' areas to do this. So there's more being created every day. I know that we're creating ours and it's been highly successful. And I know that you've been working and that's also had high levels of success. That's our way. If you want to jump in the Warriors way and have that aspect, what is another avenue that you can give people for like if you're just looking for that community or place to work on this, where would you send them?
Well, listen, I think what you're doing is fantastic, and I applaud you and everybody else who's involved for a couple reasons. One is for opening up the dialogue and having these conversations. I think they're extremely helpful, and the more we do it, the more open and honest dialogue that'll take place because people will feel comfortable doing it. Right? I think that that's key and important. And I applaud you for doing that, especially for guys. It's been a an area that's kind of underserved. So kudos to you for that. I mean, the methods and means that I have in terms of resources are more for the far end of things, but I like what you're doing. I think that's important. And there are other ways, listen, I as you were saying what you do and how you get together, I'm thinking about how when I play hockey, I go to the locker room, and the locker room kind of before and after the game is exactly what you discussed, right? And it's a bunch of guys. We get together. We have a commonality with the sport, and we chirp each other in the locker room, maybe even out on the ice, and then afterwards. So you need to have that, and you need to have that infrastructure that if you're going through a struggle, to have somebody to call and be able to share that with. So I think it's just really having that infrastructure in place, and then knowing if all that fails in that moment, that there are other options available like 988 and other resources available, calling you, like you said. But hopefully those groups and those resources help and then avoid getting to that crisis mode.
Yeah, and I'm seconding that. This is one thing that society has wrong, and I openly say it. Your guys need your guys. Like, we need each other. We need to have that hang out in the garage, work on the car, or go shoot hoops, or go play hockey, or go, just chill with each other, or go hang with your buddies. You have to be able to have those guys that you can just call. We put too much emphasis and responsibility on our partners, but most people in relationships are not trained to be able to handle somebody's complete unload while they're working through stuff or venting or whatever it may be. You got to have your people where you can kind of spread it out a little bit. But you already know that if you went to your best friend and kind of vented out the stuff with your wife, like, man, we're trying to sort this up. And where did I screw that up? And how did I get that wrong? And what do you see on this? He's like, well, did you consider that she was maybe just doing this? And you're like, that's a good call. That probably could be it. You're right. Like,
Right.
if we can have that like healthy dialogue, healthy guys that we can reach into and go, hey, what do you see here, man? And they're like, it sounds like you kind of got upset over this thing, but she just asked a question. It sounds like you kind of overreacted a little. Like, yeah, I guess. All right, yeah, I guess I got in my emotions a little. You're right. Okay. Well, maybe try asking her this to make sure that's what it really is before you blow up. And you're like, fair enough. Instead of having to go and process while she's being emotional and you're being emotional at the same time. We need our guys. Together, we're
Okay, fair enough.
stronger. And if you don't have a positive male support system and you're a guy, you're you're on your paddle boat all by yourself trying to sort out the waves as they keep hitting. Like, hang out with your guys. We'll always we like just a healthy group that we have, like the Warriors Way side, like, we pull each other out of the fire. We lock shields when you're taking daily attacks and go, hey, listen, together we can fight this, protect the village, hunt and gather, exchange information. I don't always go biblical, but I know I get into like, there's, Proverbs 25, I think it's 6, where it's like, if you're going to go into war, go to the advisors or the council first. Don't just rush in, lean in on your guys. And it's one of those things where it's like we think we have to do it all alone. The guys who are all alone are getting their ass kicked no matter how strong they are. But when we can lock shields and create a phalanx, create a formation where it's like you're just hitting the wall of trained warriors, life doesn't knock you down anymore. And so I just want to give guys hope on that one. Like, there's places we're building them to make it so if you don't want to go in and just feel like you have to fight everything alone with nobody having empathy, nobody having your back, nobody supporting you, we're building it. It exists now. And so just have the courage to go, I'm not totally in crisis yet, but I want to get some training so I can be able to handle grief, handle pain, handle stuff without turning green and incredible hulking my entire pack. Like, there is a way. And so that's where we
Yeah.
train that part.
Well, thank you for that.
Let's get into your expertise now. I know it says Midland money mindset. And now they're like, all right, you talked about all this stuff. We talked about this stuff. Can we get to that money stuff? Larry, I want more money. What's Larry going to tell me to get some money? I want more money. And so listeners are going like,
Yeah.
can I get a raise? What do I do here, Larry? How do I get more money? I want more.
Yeah, I mean, wanting more just to have more, I don't know that that's going to really get you there. You really have to figure out why you want more and then figure out a game plan on how to do that. There are, a couple of easy things that you should be thinking about. Number one, starting early. You have to start early. If you haven't started already, start today, because you're losing out on the benefit of compounding. So that's important too. Have a plan. Make sure you understand why and what you're doing and what the goal is and what your progress is so you can break down that big goal into easy digestible pieces. And three, I think it's important to have a budget, right? We talked about the coffee earlier, but if it fits in the budget, that's fine. But you need to have an idea of how much money's coming in, how much money's going out. And if you're not cash flow positive, meaning you have leftover money at the end of the month, then that's problematic. And should lead you to the point of really looking through those expenses with a fine tooth comb. Because I assure you, there are things in there that you don't need, you don't want, you could cut them out, you could reduce bills. And I think if you start on those three things and start working, you'll end up on a path where your, net worth will start increasing over time as a result of following those three simple steps.
Yeah, I could see how you definitely put the mindset aspect on this because most people societally would probably say, if I have leftover, shopping spree.
Yeah.
It's going to go into like, now that I have more, how can I spend more? Instead of now that
Well,
I have more, how do I invest to make sure that it compounds?
one thing you should do that I didn't mention is really pay yourself first. We have this kind of reverse psychology, if you will, that we, you know, get our income, pay everybody else, and then whatever's left over is left for us. And I would like to argue that we're the most important people in our own lives. So why not figure out a number that you want to pay yourself, whether that's 10%, which is a good number, or 15 or 20 or 5, whatever the number is, figure that out. If you earn $1,000 a week, take that 10% out, that $100, and put it somewhere that's going to benefit you down the road, whether it be your emergency fund, your retirement, kids' education, and then pay all your bills off that remaining 900. And then this way you don't end up in a position where, you have that money left over and, oh, now I could spend it. Well, you've already put away that 10% for yourself. So pay yourself first. It's really paramount to success.
I like it. So, all right, I'm paying myself first. I'm budgeting correctly. I cut out a bunch of my nonsense and I got my reasons why I want to do it. I know what I'm aiming at. I got a target now. All right, but the answers, they sound awesome, but I'm still finding some struggles. Larry, how do I work with you? What do I do? What if I need some Larry time? How do I get in touch with you? What am I supposed to do here? How can
Yeah.
I utilize this wisdom?
Yeah, I mean, two things. One is if you just want to learn about our concepts and how we think about things, you could certainly buy the book, which is at financialplanning.com. I'm sorry, financialplanningmadepersonal.com, which is the title of the book, which is where you could buy it in all the formats that are available, which would also lead you back to our website. So there's a contact us button where we can reach out. You can reach out to us to schedule a time to speak, and we can set up what we call an is there a fit meeting. Essentially, it's a 15-20 minute call, talk to you, learn about you, your situation, and we could discuss whether or not we feel we might be a good fit for you and you for us. Because, we do have the relationships that we embark upon today. We have relationships that we're working with second and third generations of the families we serve. So we're not looking to have a relationship for 6 months to a year. We're looking for really long term where we could be side by side, shoulder to shoulder with you. So that's really the best way. And then we can decide what the next steps are. And then we could talk about our process and how we work with the families we serve.
Yeah, I can definitely just even being in the industry hear your wisdom because you're like, we're not just a one size fits all. We've done this long enough to know that we pick our people on purpose.
Well, we want to make sure that whatever problems, issues, concerns you have are things that we're familiar with and are able to solve. Because we don't think it's fair to the family if it's not, because then it's not going to really behoove you to work with us because we're not familiar with what your situation is. And there might be a better advisor or firm for you. So we
Yeah,
want to make sure that everybody's aligned before we take that next step.
absolutely. I got another one for you. I got one for you. One of the most common things for people in this industry, and especially when you're working in mental health, physical health, in the health world, people have a hard time quantifying value. They really struggle with this, and everybody's preaching high ticket, high ticket, high ticket. But oftentimes there's a majority delivering low ticket services. And I've seen this myself. I've really looked back. I'm probably sitting on somewhere close to like between 80 to 100 grand of high ticket promises, low ticket delivery. And so, how do you help people to quantify, like, all right, I'm struggling with what my value is in this one. Now, I know this is a subjectively blanket question. I know, like, if a personal trainer versus a psychologist are two different games. But how do you help people kind of sort out the questions that they need to be asking themselves to like know their value before they start saying everything is $20,000, but they're in their first year of clients? Like, how do you help people?
You're talking about how do we get them to see our value for the price that we serve
No,
or
no, no,
charge? Is
no.
that what you're saying?
No. How do you get people to understand? Like, I want to go for a dream, a target, but I don't know how much I should be charging for my services. It's the most common thing I see in this industry
Yeah,
where people are
yeah,
scared to ask for a decent price. And so they're like, I know I got all these certifications or degrees or all these things, but do I just charge like $80 an hour? We're like, well, let's kind of figure it out. How do you help people
yeah.
to discover themselves?
I mean, I think you have to figure out what you ultimately want to be and what you want to do, and there's a place for everybody within that continuum from low end to the high end, right? You just have to figure out where you want to be. The higher up you go and the higher end you go, I think you need to make sure that you have processes in place and the people in place to deliver a higher experience, right? If you can do that, then you can, charge. And I think you start at a number that you feel like you want to earn and figure out what you want to earn over the course of the year, divide it by the number of hours you want to work, and then figure out what that hourly rate is and make sure that you have the deliverables to back it up. If you don't, you're not going to be able to charge that because people are going to be able to sniff that out very quickly. So it's more of an art than a science. But there are definitely some tools and methods you can use to figure that out. And the marketplace will tell you what you're worth over time because you'll figure that out between the yeses and the nos as a result.
That was a fantastic answer. Like, they at least gives people like, all right, here's at least a formula to get started here. Cause people want to have like, I want $1 million. You're like, well, how much have you done this? Is my third client. Like, slow down there, Turbo. Let's get some
Yeah.
practice in, and then let's see, do you have the deliverables? Can you maintain an infrastructure for that? Like, and there's a lot of times people are being misled very quickly by the Instagram community of the be high ticket, high ticket, high ticket, charge big, make it happen, hustle culture. So, like, let's go into that a little bit. I'm sure you're familiar with hustle culture. Work 26 hours a day, be on social media all day long, hustle, hustle, hustle. But you're like, how do you balance the harmony of family versus hustle culture? What's your opinion on some of this stuff that, like, it's coming pretty hard on especially the young
Yeah.
guys?
I don't believe most of the people who are pushing that agenda on Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat, wherever they are, I don't believe it. I think in many cases there's more words there than action, and it's easy to tell and say than actually do. And you got to be careful. You have to be careful on who you're taking advice and guidance from, and understand where they are in their situation. And if they're not somewhere you want to be, then I wouldn't be listening to them. So, and I think we're in a culture where anybody could say anything. The reality is that they may not have anything to back it up. So you have to be very leery. You have to be knowledgeable and you have to be able to determine, who is valid and who is not. And you have to be able to ask the questions before you make the leap. So, there was a recent quote unquote advisor that was on Instagram, I believe, talking about how when the GameStop situation took place a couple of years ago, he pulled out, I want to say like $100,000 out of a life insurance policy, bought GameStop, turned it into $400,000, and then paid back the loan and netted $300,000, and was preaching this to his followers. And so I basically put a comment there, and I called them out and I said, this is great. I said, number one, how do you call yourself an advisor? Because what you just described is really more or less gambling, which is not really investing. So that's number one problem I have. Number two, if you were that successful, I said, post a copy of your statement, blank out the account number, and let's see the $400,000 gain that you made on, or the $300,000 gain that you made on a $100,000 investment. Well, next thing I knew, I was blocked. My company was blocked. We were all blocked. So what does that tell you? That tells you that, it's probably not a real situation. So you have to be careful about who you're watching and who you're listening
I love it.
to.
Man, I like the way you talk, man. You speak my language. We should challenge everything. Ask if it's true, show us it's true. Let's go. Let's do it. Can you really
Yeah.
do what you're saying? It sounds like you're telling people to gamble. And now it gets into the shame of all the things. Like, if you're not looking like The Rock, it's because you're not working out hard enough. If you're not rich like Gary Vee or Grant Cardone, it's because you're not hustling hard enough. If you're not having these results, you're not enough. It's not enough. You're not enough. And these shame stacks start getting really hard in this industry. I definitely like, I resonate with you with challenge. Are you really helping people, or are you actually doing harm more than good by kind of putting the drinks or the dreams in front of people, you know?
Right. Agreed.
Yeah. Oh man, and this is just I'm just kind of going with you on this one. Larry, if you ever got to bounce, you let me know, man. It's no worries,
I'm
man.
like there. I was supposed to be off. I told your staff 1:15.
Oh, no worries, man. If you want to, yeah, if we're good, we're good. I just like the conversations, and we can always have more. But like,
I hear it.
yeah, no worries. Hey, listen, let's put a pin there. If we got to
Okay.
bounce, we got to bounce. But thank you so much for your time, man. And I definitely want people to be able to get your book and be able to at least have an opportunity to spend time with you. Hopefully, this was at least a little fulfilling for being able to get
Yeah,
some
I
reach and
appreciate
help.
it. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you having the conversation about mental health because I think it's, super important and super helpful.
Yeah. Well, we have to have more mental health talks and not do medication for the symptoms talks.
I agree. I agree
Yeah.
wholeheartedly.
Thank you for your time, brother. I appreciate you
Thanks, Rick.
so much.
You
We'll be in
got it.
touch, and we'll be
Sounds good.
posting this soon.
Awesome. Let me know and we'll put it out there as well.
My man. Thanks,
All
brother.
right.
I'll
Be
talk to you
well.
later.
All right. Bye. Have a good one.
You too.